Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Brendan Hauser with EVOQ Bikes. So I want to talk about Funk Bottoms Gravel. It was the mega gravel race that we did in Ohio, myself and my friend Bodo. I updated the gravel training tips blog. So if you're trying to get into gravel, if you're trying to get into longer bike rides, it definitely still requires you to have some intense training like VO2 max training, threshold training. Do not just ride long sweet spot. That is not a gravel race. And so in 8 hours and 13 minutes, we normalized over 3.5 watts per kg, 300 watts normalized, 248 average, just under 16 miles per hour, which seems kind of slow until you realize there were 17,100 feet of climbing. And in this video, I want to talk about the nutrition and a couple things that I didn't do correctly, supplements that I used during the race, and pacing, and then the mindset on a race that I knew would be so incredibly difficult. And to touch on the race metrics real quickly, that one thing I wanted to avoid was super hard efforts because I had raced amateur nationals the day before. You can still do a gravel race like this, and I had under 10 minutes of anaerobic time. Now, granted, there was almost 30 minutes of VO2 max and an hour of threshold and an hour and a half of tempo, but you can meter your efforts, and that's something that we'll talk about that I think is really important in the beginning on such a long day. And this, we could also go down the rabbit hole on talking on tactics. Do you let guys go sometimes in races like this? And I think yes is very often the answer, because you want to finish strong if you want to try and win. So first things first, nutrition. In my head, I was thinking we would average 16, maybe 17 miles an hour. I don't know why I thought we would go that fast. I brought 1,100 grams of carbs with me. That was not enough. I actually ran out about 45 minutes out and got a little worried. I figured, hey, I've got enough fuel. At that point, I was pretty far ahead. So I really went into pace mode and made sure not to surge too hard. And that was a mistake, very newbie mistake. You always bring extra. And that math is really 130 per hour at 8 hours. I should have brought at least 150 per hour. So 1,200, another 100 grams. And I know one thing that I screwed up was when I was driving from Amateur Nats to the Airbnb, which is in the middle of nowhere, there were no stores. I almost stopped at this Dollar General to grab some candy, and I didn't want to have candy in the car because I was kind of hungry. I was kind of banged up after that race, to be honest. And I thought I'll just get it when I'm closer to the Airbnb and it'll work out. And I just never passed another store. So by the time I got there, went to bed ASAP, and screwed that one up. So got lucky, bring extra. For hydration, I used 2 of the Usway packs. So I had one, Bodo had an extra, filled with water. I pre-salted one of them with 4.5 grams of salt. So that's 1.5. So the 2-liter pack inside is basically 3 water bottles. So that's 1.5 grams of salt per water bottle, which is like 600 milligrams of sodium, which I knew might get Ohio hot. So I wanted more salt than less. And then the one that Bodo gave me, I had him do straight water. I should have had him pre-salt it, but I had some of the Hello Blue hydration caps. I used those instead. I think I'm just going to always pre-salt it. The water tasted a little salty, but it was actually kind of nice. I enjoyed it much more than regular water. That's a first for me, so I'm going to keep going with that. And then to have liquid carbs, I had 4 bottles, 2 on the bike, and we would be coming back to resupply halfway. So you did 2 loops. So I had 2 bottles. I had 3 bottles on my back, basically in the Usway pack. And then I had 2 more bottles waiting for me in another Usway pack at the pit stop. So that was 4 bottles, all had 100 grams of sugar and 1.5 grams of salt per bottle. Worked well, just needed more carbs. Supplements, ketones. Again, I screwed up. Always bring extra. I was like, 2 bottles is enough. I don't want to be crushing through these. It was a race that I wanted to do well at, but ketones are also expensive, so I tried to minimize the cost. And I brought 2 bottles with the mindset of taking it at hour 2, 4, 6, and 7. So half. Well, I took it at 2, then I needed it at 3.5, then I jumped it up to 5, and then I waited because I was like, ooh, I only have half left. And I wanted to make sure I had enough energy at the end, and it just was working so well every time. I thought, I'm going to take it at 6. I was by myself at that point. I said, nah, you know what? You still have 2 hours to go. Pedal through that hour looking forward to the boost at 7. And man, Delta G ketones, they are just incredible. It's almost unfair. And now here's my new tactic. This next one, skip ahead a few seconds if you don't believe in Lactigo. I was feeling it in my legs coming up as we were coming back into town. I had attacked probably 10 miles out of town. So I'm coming back in. I want to keep a solid lead on these guys. I knew I had only a few minutes to initially, and I was going to try to extend my lead early in the beginning of the second lap because that's where all the climbing was. And I could feel it in my hip flexors a little bit. I could feel it in my quads. So as I got to the car, changed packs, I grabbed a bottle of Lactigo, threw it in my frame bag, and off I went. While I'm riding, I get back, I pass those guys coming in, and I just started to squirt the Lactigo on my quads, and I didn't even rub it in because my legs were pretty dirty, and just let it sort of drip there. That actually worked. So as that worked, I pulled up my jersey, and there's like the U shape here, right? There's your band coming down, and as I'm on a climb, so I'm not going fast, I pulled the band out and took the bottle. How did I do this? Same hand. So I have my hand on the bar still, and I just kind of wiggled the nozzle in there and went squirt, squirt, and let it drip down on my hip flexor. And I did decide in crazy thought time to put some on my hand and just see if it would go through the shorts on my lower back. That did not work. So I don't know how to address the lower back yet, but that would be another area that I'd look to hit on a 6 hour ride, 8-hour ride. And I'm doing more of these long rides now. I've kind of fallen back in love with them, and I'm pretty excited to keep doing them. So I think one thing you could do is when you stop to pee, do it. Make sure you don't touch under there. Put it on, go pee, and then put the Lactigo on your back. But, you'll figure it out. And if you make that mistake, you won't make it again twice. Pacing, I think of pacing, when we say pacing, we're always talking about avoiding going hard. But pacing also means when to go hard. And so when I got away from those guys, I knew I wanted to stay out of sight. And when you're in a gravel race and there are some steep climbs, that's really where you can make some headway. You can take 20, 30 seconds on guys when you look so close, but then when they get over the top and you're actually 30, 40 seconds up the road on them, it's demoralizing. So the pacing for me was avoiding any really hard anaerobic efforts early because I knew I had cramped the day before. So this is, less than 24 hours before I was not in great feels. And so I avoided those. But then when I needed to push the pace is when I used just a little bit of that effort. And I think it's something that you really want to do in training of end of the day efforts. And if you're doing a 5-hour ride, you don't want to do this all the time. But if it's a day where you're not riding just endurance, put out some efforts at the end of the day and don't even look at the watts. You know what going hard is. You're probably not going to be able to, I shouldn't say probably, you might not be able to hold threshold wattage. Do it by what the effort feels like. Do it by RPE. That's the threshold you have at that moment in time. I still laugh. My old coach, Tom Bell, used to call FTP fresh TP, or not call FTP, but he called fresh TP, like what you're doing when you get on the bike, you warm up and crank out a 20-minute effort. And he always knew it was good to have a coach that also believed in the real FTP application in a race, like the type of racing I was doing, I guess is what I'm saying. End of hour 4, end of hour 5, end of hour 6. What can you do? And you're going to hear someone from Project Echelon in an upcoming podcast where he's talking about sometimes the intention of the workout is what's most important. And I'll give you a teaser. That's the Pip King who's coming on. So we had a great conversation a few weeks ago. And then mindset. After the first 2 hours, I could look it up here, but I don't want to waste your time. We had gone less than 30 miles. And I remember looking down and it said distance to go, 105 miles left. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness. Settle in and remind yourself, you don't need to be the aggressor in this race. You need to follow moves. You need to stay with the lead group. You don't want to get left behind, but stay safe. There is a guy who could rip downhill way faster than almost all of us. So what did I do? I let him go every time because he's not trying to ride away from us. He's just much faster downhill than the gravel rider racers and the roadie racers. He's a mountain biker. And that's somebody that you worry about later in the race. I was going to make sure, or I was going to try my damnedest to make sure he was not around at the end, because if there was a downhill near the finish, that would be a problem because he could definitely out-descend me. And then, be safe when you're riding in the pack. Leave a little bit of extra room. I put this in the blog. Drafting's important, but having someone else crash in front of you on something silly like a pothole that you can't see. That's how I got crashed out. I crashed myself out. I ran into a guy who crashed, and that sucked in Mid-South gravel back in 2018, I want to say. And there was 5 of us left. It was like Ted King, Payson, myself, a guy from Easton, and the guy from CCB who crashed. And I think that was it. So I broke my bike. Should have left more room. Tough lesson to learn. So hopefully these tips help you in your next gravel race, gravel training, big rides. Please send this to a friend and forward it on to somebody else. If you're on Spotify, please follow. It helps us so much. If you're on Apple, please take 2 minutes and leave us a 5-star review. And of course, if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe. Thanks, guys. Thanks, girls. Thanks, humans. Let's keep training hard. Train smart. Let's get after it. Talk to you soon. See ya.